Hello and welcome to another episode of CinemaPunk, the show where we take two different films with similar themes and compare them one against the other. In the Super Bowl tonight, we have the cyberpunk dystopian future of Rollerball! Ding ding ding! The old guard from 1975 versus the new kids on the block at 2002. Woo! Who will win this epic journey of Red versus Dead, Rollerball versus Rollerball? Bit much? Before we tee off, I just want to acknowledge the difference in which these two films are usually regarded. The 1975 film is considered something of a genre classic. A lot of people love this film. In fact, this was personally recommended to me by my friend Steve McCartney. He's got his own channel. Check that out. The 2002 film, however, is usually garners the same reaction that people would have if their dog with worms starts scraping themselves along their new white carpet. And my god, I think this is justified. Thematically, these films are pretty much the same film. Some of the character names are the same, the focus on the same fictional sport, both even fully discuss the topic of capitalistic gain and ratings lost as a reason for murder and grievous bodily harm towards the game's players. But who did it better? Let's delve in and find out. The 1975 film follows Jonathan, played by legendary actor James Caan, as he barrels towards his twilight years in the sport of rollerball. As an all-American player, we quickly realise we're in a dystopian future, where corporations control everyone. The biggest threat to their grip of power is any individual who might threaten to become too popular. This is an interesting take on this recurring cyberpunk theme, because usually the corporate overlords themselves are generally sort of the household names and celebrities. Within the world of Rollerball, they're all nameless, and only really known within their own inner circle. This creates a vacuum to prevent any form of populist overthrow. If all you can love or hate is a company logo, you can't really effectively gain control. Jonathan is a star player in an aggressive sport designed to control the masses. As he continues to outperform his opponents despite his older years, the corporations realise he's becoming something of a cultural icon, something they cannot allow. Intending to retire him by the end of the current tournament, even against his will, it becomes clear that the only way to get him to exit the game is to force him. Rollerball switches from an aggressive sportsman's game to a gladiatorial bloodbath, with Jonathan fighting for his life and his rights as an individual. I can't really divulge much more than that without spoiling the film. I will say this though, when I first went into the film, I wasn't really expecting much. I saw the 1970s jerseys and sort of the obvious sports references, and that really doesn't appeal to me. Surprise, the big fat guy isn't a big fan of sports. Hey. But in fact, my only real reason for going into watching this film early doors was because of its obvious influences on an early 90s video game I used to play on the Amiga, called Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe. And in fact, what I got out of the film was even greater than I expected. A real deep, well thought out dystopian future, sure with a couple of plot holes, I get you there people, but it's really enjoyable, really well thought through in most ways, and actually I got a lot more out of it than I expected to. Thankfully, John McTiernan was around in 2002 to deliver the remake that nobody was asking for. I don't really know what happened to John McTiernan. He kicked off a really good action career with Predator, Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October, and sprinkled in some nice cheese during the 90s with Die Hard with a Vengeance and The 13th Warrior, before disappearing off of the movie-making circuit completely only a year after Rollerball's release. He got arrested for wiretapping his producer during Rollerball and then lying to the FBI about it, and was sentenced to a year in prison. That'd do it. Do you ever get the feeling a script was written by a committee of 60-year-olds trying to be hip-hop, cool and down with the kids?
If the cops get you, you're on your own.
So we're introduced to the super cool, totes rebellious, gnarly brasky that is Jonathan, as he street luges at 12 miles an hour into San Francisco against some guy we never see again.
Rolling around at the speed of sound. Got places to go, gotta follow my rainbow.
Motorbikers are stunned, thrilled, in awe. They are truly blessed to watch some guy slide on his ass at a third of the national speed limit. Alright, look. I know, I'm not a sporty guy, alright? And I'm sure street luge is incredibly thrilling and fun to do, but I just don't understand. Like, what's the point? You just look like you're having a motorcycle accident, but you forgot the bit with the bike. Are you just trying to find the cheapest way to break your legs? Though what I would like to see is someone go shopping on a street luge. See a load of people coming back from the top of a hill with loads of Asda bags stuck on them going, "Rah!" After Jonathan has his Sonic Adventure 2 moment, he bumps into LL Cool J, who offers to let him join him in signing up to play the Russian sport of Rollerball. Here we see our first kind of major example of the film cowardly backing away from the story elements of the original. Instead of a dystopian America, which would fit the American NFL sports motifs of the film, it's now nothing to do with America, and instead it's set in some Russian and Middle Eastern territories that are loosely selected at random.
Yeah, that means teamwork, so no more cowboy hot dog shit.
No more cowboy hot dog shit.
Oh, racism. Cool. Now we get our first taste of Rollerball. Leathered up with some increasingly bizarre headwear, the game itself is not too dissimilar from the 1975 original. They've changed the circle into a figure of 8 and added a wider variety of areas to jump off of, but the rules are basically the same.
Go through the rabbit hole.
Gonna need a ride.
It's wacky, it's fun, it's crazy, it's outrageous. Fun house, a whole lot of fun. Prizes to be won.
It's a real crazy show where anything will go.
Fun house, quiz is a race. Real wacky place.
Use your body and your brain.
If you wanna play the game.
It's time for Funhouse! Wacky contestants, messy games, the Fun Kart Grand Prix race, and a crazy chase to win lots of prizes. Now here's the guy who puts the fun into Funhouse, Pat Shaw!
We got a fox in the box. A fox in the box. They put that fox in the box.
What the hell is going on in this film? On returning to the changing room post-game, the rookie tries to introduce himself to Rebecca Romaine's character and is essentially disregarded.
What was that? I think it's something about her only batting for the home team.
Don't be that film, Rollerball. Don't be the film where the lesbian is part of the team, but she just needs a good man to shag her straight. Don't be that film.
It should be our secret.
Why set up that she's a lesbian if she's just going to shag him 5 minutes later? He doesn't even say anything to her. He just walks in to try and find something completely different, and she's there pushing up a barbell with her flapjacks are flapping. I mean, women of this ample shape surely don't work out with their tops off, do they? Answers on a postcard. Send nudes. The gaggle of financiers, led by Jean Reno the professional, all realise that they get far better ratings when a player is hurt during a match. They have a top American financier flying over to watch over the current championship and potentially invest, so they want to make a good impression. In pursuit of the money, they began orchestrating more and more brutal assaults on the players, ensuring no harm comes to Jonathan and LL Cool J. They're Americans, and keeping them in the game is a surefire way to get the American investor to invest. Jonathan and LL Cool J figure out what's going on and attempt to flee the country, in a sequence that kind of looks like it's been filmed on one of those old 90s Sony camcorders with the night vision mode on it. This fails, and Jonathan realises that the only way out alive is to tank Jean Reno's investment opportunity and eventually take him out of the game. Now I've slandered this film on an awful lot in this storyline breakdown, and believe me, we've not even gotten to some of the audio and visual problems that this film has, but I'm gonna come to something of a bit of a shock. I honestly believe the germ of a good film is here. Maybe not a great film, likely not a cinematic classic, but there are moments in which the story feels like it could be starting to travel a more interesting path. Spoiler alert, but the ending showcases Jonathan getting beaten to hell in the arena, escaping the arena walls to chase down and murder Jean Reno. The directing and the editing doesn't really gel at this point, sort of towards the end, and I'll come to the editing problems in the visual section in just a moment. The direction at this point seems to have Jonathan as a broken man, living a life of non-stop violence, therefore turning him into outright murder. I originally felt that McTiernan was going for a sort of deeper violence begets violence angle, and the unpersoning of someone that comes with violence. Seen done much better actually in Jean-Claude Van Damme film In Hell. Brilliant film, absolutely recommend it. Unusual for a Van Damme film, but actually he's brilliantly acted in that. This is supported by the fact that the first draft of the script was considered to be a work of genius by anybody that was actually able to read it. Some even suggested that it surpassed the original and fixed all the problems and plot holes that came up within the original movie. The original script focused a lot more on the social commentary, and remnants of this have carried over into the final product. McTiernan actually is not the reason that these elements still exist, far from it. He's the one who ordered the scriptwriters to remove as much social commentary as possible and focus more on WWE-style showmanship, ridiculous costumes and crazy stunts. Subsequent reshoots saw McTiernan pull out most of the violence and the nudity from the film in order to garner it a more easily sellable PG-13 rating. His first several drafts of the edited movie were apparently really confusing. Considering how horrific the editing is in this film already, it begs the question again, what the hell happened to John McTiernan? He's directed some of the greatest action films of all time, and yet by 2002 did he just forget how to make a movie? The more I look into the history of this film, the more upset I become, because there apparently was so much high quality material that's just been lost to time. And we'll cover all of those in just a moment. The 1975 film of Rollerball. Baby, I've missed you. First of all, Rollerball's aesthetics don't match what you might have come to expect from the cyberpunk genre. The arenas are a cross between basketball courts and motorcycle walls of death, albeit much larger to allow for large groups to actually play the game. A lot of wooden panelling with very 70s orange hues play out across the movie, even bleeding out into the civilian decor that surrounds James Caan. Multiple TVs set into medium brown wood panelling look very modern and sleek at the time, but have definitely aged. Even the costumes are mild adaptations of American football jerseys and helmets. Visually, Rollerball isn't very striking. It's well shot. The picture is clear and it has a filmic grain, but you won't be mistaking it for a modern movie. What is important here is how well the action scenes are crafted. Rollerball is an incredibly hectic sport, but the director Norman Jewison keeps the camera steady, uses tracking shots and switches to close-ups at just the right time to keep the pace of the games high without losing the action. Tracking shots as the boys swing around the track and motorbikes speed up the players is a wonderfully well thought out way of keeping the audience in the loop. We're central to the action, we're at the epicenter of the arena, and it's incredibly thrilling. I just wish that the lighting became darker and more cinematic as the Rollerball tournament becomes more and more violent. Personal preference maybe, but films like 12 Angry Men showcase how much you can change a single room with just lighting and camera angles alone. This is an incredibly well made movie. Just temper your visual expectations for something that you would expect to see pre-Blade Runner. So let's move on to this one. The remake was released 27 years after the original. In that time, the majority of the cyberpunk movie genre had come and gone. In fact, The Matrix had even come out by that point, even though they were still only on the first movie. While all titles age, you'd expect Rollerball's 2002 offering to be bit more better put together, with more inspiration available for lighting, hues and cinematic tones, and also having the directing legend behind Predator and Die Hard at the helm. Well, with the 1975 film, I started with the negative and moved on to the positive. With Rollerball 2002, I'm gonna have to go the other way around. Ignoring the story, because we've already covered that, the action sequences in Rollerball 2002 are incredibly well put together. Yes, the costumes look like knockoffs from the first X-Men movie, and the masks get more ridiculous as the movie goes on, but the actual action is competently put together. The Wall of Death design is replaced with a figure of 8, with ramps and additional features to add more excitement to certain shots. The original Rollerball didn't require as much additional fluff because the storyline was still quite strong, but it is good to see at least that McTiernan is delivering on the action sequences, even if he's not really delivering on much else. It doesn't make up for an awful script, but it's better than nothing. I will say though, for the most part, the film keeps a well-lit cinematic look. In general, I had no issues with the visual quality of the film, and for the most part I don't blame the cinematographer for the issues that are present. I blame John McTiernan. We've already established just how chaotic the film's production was, but what I didn't mention too strongly in the storyline section is just how badly this film is edited together. Turns out that a director's cut wouldn't help with this film either. See, the first few cuts of the film were actually edited by John McTiernan himself, and were supposedly worse than what we get in the final product. And this film has some horrendous edits. Weirdly, these crap edits only happen in dialogue sequences. The action scenes are competently cut together. Somehow, basic dialogue was the bit that they couldn't get right. And because none of us have seen the rushes, there's no way to know if that's an issue with the editing room, or if that's just because there wasn't a single good take for almost any of the lines. Here's a short dialogue sequence where they weirdly cut it at odd times.
You need to go tell Petrovich.
This happens at least 3 times that I noticed in the film. And they don't take place at particularly important plot points. It doesn't speed up the dialogue, it doesn't help with impacting the viewer, it just seems to be a weird hack job. But the biggest hack job comes in about halfway through the movie. They switch between 2 different takes of Jonathan saying a line and stepping forward, but they clearly struggle to match the 2 takes up in post-production. So to try and better match the footage, they slow down the first take as they get towards the end, and then just pop him forward as they sort of cross him over into the next take.
Well, you see, you hit the pod ramp.
How did that get left in? There were 2 other editors on this film, and not only did they not catch this, the way it's edited shows that they put effort in to make it look this bad. Was there no complete take of Chris Klein stepping forward and saying a line? I find that really hard to believe. Dodgy cuts are one thing, but then there's the entire nighttime chase sequence where it looks like someone forgot to turn on any lights. I initially thought they filmed this with actual night vision modes on old Sony camcorders. I made a joke about that in the storyline segment, in fact. The footage is that bad. Compared to the rest of the film, image detail is way down, it's blurry as if suffering a mismatched frame rate, but apparently this isn't the case. According to IMDb, this has been filmed the same way as the rest of the film. However, it was poorly lit, and they added a weird green overlay to it to try and simulate night vision. Was this cinematographer Steve Mason's idea or John McTiernan's? You'd think, seeing how bad this footage looks, that the studio would ask McTiernan to go out and reshoot it, wouldn't you? Don't really know how to break this to you guys, but this footage? This is the reshoot. Apparently, the first time they did this sequence, it was far too dark. McTiernan was told to go and film it again to improve the visuals. It's just a rabbit hole, isn't it? You dive in and you find chug nuts, and you think, yeah, it's pretty bad, but you can deal with chug nuts, so you keep on digging and you find yourself face first in a cow pat. And after a while you think, you know what, I can deal with the chug nuts, I can deal with the cow pat, I'll just keep on digging further, and then you slam straight into bear feces. And at that point, you start to worry how far you're going to go into everyone else's sewage. In general, I prefer the lighting in this film to the original. The action's pretty good, but how are they unable to edit a conversation properly? Rollerball, never leave me again. The original Rollerball's audio comes in 2 flavours, 5.1 surround sound and stereo. The surround sound mix is good, with active rear channels during the Rollerball games, but it's held back by a big issue. This is one of those American soundtracks where the dialogue is lost in the mix. To be fair, it's not a fault of the surround mix itself, this is a problem with the original audio as it was recorded. This is a big shame because Rollerball actually has dialogue worth listening to. I don't mind having to listen to a film loud if I'm really engrossed in it, but having to yo-yo the volume is a real pain in the arse. Outside of this quite major problem, the audio is otherwise fine. Sound effects, atmospherics and music fit the tone of the movie perfectly, and hearing the crowd and motorbikes revolve around the soundspace is an excellent touch of immersion. I just wish it wasn't ruined by such a disparity in the dialogue. The remake scores an easy victory at first glance. The dialogue is always well placed and audible, even during the moments when surround sound speakers are rattling off skates, motorbikes and the crowd at high levels. Rollerball 2002 is a film you can easily put on and not have to reach for the remote to keep things at a reasonable volume. The surround sound mix here is fantastic as well, as you should expect from a big action blockbuster of its time. The licensed soundtrack will definitely be an acquired taste, rammed to the brim as it is with the contemporary flavours of heavy and nu metal. As someone who was a grunger in 2002, I really cannot be mad at this soundtrack. They're all great choices too. Pod, Pink, Slipknot and Rob Zombie. Yeah! Ah! Yes, it'll age like a slug in salt, but for the losers of the early noughties, it's like a welcome home hug. But, as with all things in this remake, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. Course not! Even when this film has an open goal to defeat the original, it somehow manages a way to descend itself into turd. The film's original score began to annoy me over time, specifically the constant reuse of sleigh bells across the entire movie. It's not a Christmas film. Christmas isn't even mentioned. There's no snow. They're in the Middle East and southern parts of Eastern Europe. Why am I listening to sleigh bells during a motorcycle chase? Eric Serra composed this score. He'd previously done compositions for GoldenEye, The Fifth Element and Leon the Professional. He's done so much better than this elsewhere. His techno and guitar mixes are fantastic. The Jingle Bells motif showed up so frequently that it stood out. While Eric Serra generally does fine work, the soundtrack to this film was originally composed by legendary techno producer BT. He even did interviews on it and had a cameo in the film. All his music and cameos were cut when McTiernan felt that the soundtrack was, and I quote, too Arabic. They're in the Middle East. In a desert. Where the bloody hell does Jingle Bells fit in? Even then, this could be argued on stylistic grounds. Okay, the metal soundtrack will work for some and absolutely not work for others. And yes, I love BT as a techno musician, but others won't have even heard of him. And some may not even mind the sleigh bells constantly around the soundtrack. But again, you're just about to fish yourself out of the smell of turd, only to be met with...
Come on, baby!
Alright, character break. Look, I know I edit these films in silly ways quite a lot. I mean, I turned the remake into 90s TV show Funhouse earlier on in this video. So I must feel I make this clear. I did not add the sound effects you are about to hear.
Come on, baby! Whoa! Who said this isn't an off-road bike? I've got news for you, Rick! They've got an off-road airplane!
There were 39 individuals credited in the sound department for this film. 5 of them were sound effect editors. 5. There were a further 3 sound editors on top of that, and 2 sound supervisors. How? Well, yes, this conclusion is going to be a huge surprise. Will I recommend the cinematic classic or a half-assed reboot plagued with horrors? Yeah, for the love of all that is holy, please watch the 1975 film. Yes, the audio isn't great and the visuals have dated and are a little bit flat now, but it still looks nice enough, sounds great during the games themselves, and the storyline is at least interesting and coherent. I will throw the remake a bone though, and say that I really did enjoy myself watching it. Yeah, I went in with the understanding that this wasn't a patch on the original, okay, and each time it failed, I found myself laughing. I couldn't believe how many bad elements managed to make their way into the final product. If you're the kind of person who gets a kick out of watching really bad films, like films that are so bad they're funny, like American Ninja, Mr. Ice Cream Man, or The Room, then I genuinely recommend Rollerball 2002 to you. That is quite a niche audience, however, and you really must be clear going in that this film is utter garbage. To sum it up, Rollerball 1975 is a fantastic film with only a few niggles into its high definition release. As someone who has literally zero interest in sport, I found myself immersed in a brilliantly thought out dystopian future that truly challenges the ideas of individuality. Few sports movies tell stories this deep, including, unfortunately, its own remake. Thank you so much for joining us here today on CinemaPunk. We hope that you enjoy this series as well as all of our other programs that we've got on this channel and across the rest of our social media network. If you enjoyed this show, please follow us on the following social media platforms, and we will catch you next time.